Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today, we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from UE Loyalist. We didn't break any laws. Sure, go to the authorities. Let's jump right in. This story took place back in the mid-90s. My wife and I were newly married and our daughter was still an infant. My wife worked in healthcare as a home care nurse, traveling from house to house looking after people. However, after our daughter was born, she did not want a job that put her on the road so much and shifts in the evening. So she applied to be a cleaner at the military base near our community. Two things about our situation that are noteworthy. One is that my wife is a visible minority, and second, as a healthcare worker, she logs everything as a force of habit. The company that hired her was a national company. The base office usually had 5 employees. One had recently quit because her husband was moving with his military job to another part of the country. So the local boss hired my wife to replace her. The 4 other workers were tight. Louise was the boss, who hired her best friend Donna, Donna's brother Dan, and Louise's niece Tracy. My wife was a true outsider. She immediately saw things were not quite on the level. Even though my wife was paid from 4 p.m. to midnight, she was home by 8 p.m. every night. She was also excluded from cleaning the buildings that housed the engineering and tenancy offices. Occasionally, when she would clean those offices, she saw her colleagues rifling through desks and filing cabinets, photocopying documents, and other shady stuff. My wife also saw Louise threaten a soldier with extra duties for not opening doors fast enough. Louise's husband was a senior NCO in the unit, but jobs were hard to find at the time, so my wife was willing to accept a little discomfort to her ethics. However, after a few months, the racial epithets started. It started with a nickname, then morphed into slurs, and then rumors about her. They started telling racial jokes without trying to hide it. When my wife complained to the 4 of them that she was uncomfortable, she got called weak, and they threatened her employment. My wife told them that she would go to the head office. So she called the head office from work. Stuart from HR dressed down my wife over woman's talk, and she needed to thicken her skin and not be too sensitive. My wife countered that she would go to the authorities. Stuart said, no laws have been broken, so she should go to the authorities. Good luck. Later that shift, she was fired for attitude. So my wife went to the authorities, just not the police. She went to the Human Rights Commission and to the military base headquarters. She gave both photocopies of her logs. The human rights investigation determined that there was a work environment that tolerated racist behaviors. That garnered an apology and an acknowledgement from Stuart with the smug comment that they will henceforth include a clause about racial sensitivity in their employee paperwork. He even made a comment to my wife that essentially this was nothing. However, behind the scenes, the base had been doing their own investigation. Some of the people whose desks had been rifled in the tenancy buildings had reported that they suspected they had been snooped through. The dates of some of their reports matched my wife's logs of the dates that she was there. Louise threatening a soldier was followed up, and it was discovered that Louise's husband had chastised the soldier and arranged for him to do 2 weeks extra duties, a violation of an abuse of authority statute. The contract with the base required 40 hours of service per day. The base pulled the security and key logs, showing that work was always done by 8 p.m. The base was paying for 40 hours per day and getting 20 hours service. There was a clause in the cleaning contract that stated that federal government human rights regulations needed to be followed. The results of the commission's investigation determined that they were in violation. Other bases were contacted to see what was going on with this company, and they found out others were having similar issues. As a result, the base broke the contract with cause. It was a 5-year contract broken after the 2nd year. Louise, Donna, Dan, and Tracy were suddenly out of work. The next cleaning company came in. All personnel had to undergo vetting for security. All cleaning was done during the day, preventing people from rifling desks. 40 hours was 40 hours, and cleaners were not authorized to engage soldiers beyond casual "how are you" conversations. My wife went back to healthcare. However, every once in a while she wonders what Stuart thinks of women's talk now. OP added an edit onto the story to clarify some of the details. It says, First, thanks for your comments. Makes me realize that even though I think the story is complete enough to tell, the odd detail could have been added to make the story more clear, yet not compromise identities of the people in the story. I am Canadian. I grew up in bilingual communities, French and English, and my various school systems I attended growing up has had an impact on my spellings, realize, behavior, skeptical, etc. The desk snooping was in the base housing offices. The 4 cleaners all lived in base housing, so they were looking up gossip-worthy material on their neighbors and friends, etc. They were also looking to see what major contracts were coming for house repairs. It was not classified material. While the 4 of them lost employment, they were not held accountable. The company that had the contract just laid them off, so they were able to find work again shortly. However, just not as cleaners. Cleaners had a reliability screening to work on the base even prior to this. However, it is as simple as a criminal record check, not much more. After this, the cleaners never worked in an area without supervision, and always during the same workday as the people in the offices. The NCO who chastised the soldier was called to task for that. He ended up getting moved a year later, with a bit of a shadow following him. However, it did not last long, and there was no permanent career mark left. Finally, we were very young. My wife and I are, and were, not the type to rock the boat. I was brand new in the military and did not want to be labeled as a problem soldier, so we remained quiet for too long. After this, both of us grew our confidence and were able to move on. We don't stay quiet too long when something is not right. Thanks. Oh, this story really had me wondering because I live in a Canadian town that has a military base in it. I wonder if it happened here. Although OP did mention in a comment that it was over a quarter of a century ago, so it's not really relevant anymore. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Burnt Onions Taste Good. But it will do you no good. Let's jump right in. This is actually my dad's story, and it is decades old, but it was too good not to post. My dad, a single father with 1 kid, met my mom and eventually got married and had kids. Back then, my dad was working folk, but my dad had hurt his back at work and was off for several months, and money had gotten tight, to the point that my parents literally had no extra money to spare. We were a loving family though, so we were okay as long as we had food, which we did. But then, I got a bad ear infection and needed antibiotics, but my parents literally had no money at this point. Being in Canada, we had a welfare system which you can apply for money to help people who are down and out. So my parents head over to the welfare office where this all starts. They go up to a counter and enter Karen. My mom says, "My son has an ear infection and has a $10 prescription I need help paying." Karen gets the family details and comes back and says, "I am very sorry, you don't qualify for that because you have an employable male in your household." My parents protest because my dad's back, but Karen isn't having any of it. My dad had not been to the doctor because there's not much they can do for a back that's out other than give pain meds, so without doctor's note, they didn't believe he was actually unable to work. The lady insists there is nothing they can do. This pisses my dad off to no end, and he is not going to let his new son with an ear infection suffer. He says to Karen, "I want an appointment to apply for welfare for myself only." Karen says, "You can't do that." My dad, getting angrier by the minute, says, "Are you denying me my appointment?" Karen says, "You don't need an appointment, you don't qualify." My dad said, "So you're denying me my appointment?" Karen says, "Well, no, fine, you can have an appointment, but it will do you no good." The appointment for him to apply was scheduled for the next day. Enter my dad again, this time with a new rental receipt from a house that was for rent out at this beautiful lake near our town. He said, "Here is my new rental I found yesterday. I am unemployed and need my rent covered." The lady says, "You can't do that, you are an employable male, you need to work." My dad says, "Well, I am moving with my 1 son, and I can't work since I'm a single parent." The lady laughs and says, "You can't just take 1 kid and move out." My dad said, "Well, I can no longer live with my wife, I am leaving her, so now she is a single mom and qualifies for the medication." The Karen, still thinking she will screw my dad over, said, "You can't just break up with her so she can get welfare." "Excuse me," my dad replies. "I can break up with her for her feet stinking or bad breath. I don't need a damn reason to dump her butt." Karen huffs and said, "Well, maybe she will qualify, but you don't qualify for that new rental, as you would need to be a single dad, and you can't just take one child and leave claiming to be a single dad." Out comes the court document stating my dad has sole custody of his first son from his first marriage. This letter states I have custody of my first child before my second marriage, so me and him are leaving. Now I am a single dad and am now qualified for welfare. This pissed off Karen. She knew she just got played. So she tried her best to make the situation difficult for my dad. "Well, if you leave her, you are not allowed to go over there and hang out." Again, my dad, "Excuse me? I have 3 kids with this lady. I will go over and visit my kids any darn time I like. You don't get to tell me when I can visit them." That was the finishing move. Karen had lost every aspect of her case. My dad did qualify for rent, and she was forced to pass him his emergency check he just applied for. My dad, after getting his check for hundreds of dollars, turns to Karen and says, "Now my ex would like to apply for the $10 medication. She is a single mom without an employable male in the house, so should qualify." He turns to Karen and snarks, "But it will do you no good. My mom got the medication, and he rented a cabin on the lake for several months. All the while, me and my siblings hung out there and enjoyed our summer cabin." Now, OP did mention in a comment down below that this was many decades ago and things have probably changed since then as far as the welfare system goes up here in Canada. It was interesting to note that there was another comment down below from somebody who worked in the welfare system. They said that their job and many of their coworkers' jobs were to help people, but there was always 1 or 2 who thought they were there to save the government money. I love hearing stories of people being able to work the system to their favor. Kudos to OP's mom and dad. Our next story today comes to us from CuriousCat0070, the Red Queen. Let's jump right in. The Red Queen was number 2 in our office, a person who rose through treachery, backstabbing, personal connections, and incompetence. You know, the typical way a manager moves up. She spent 27 months as a line worker before deposing her supervisor in a coup. In this industry, it usually takes 5 years to get to a point where one really knows what they are doing. She then attached herself to an office boss known as Dan the Dirty, doing his hatchet work on employees, and so became indispensable to him. So, when Dan the Dirty came to our office, he dragged the Red Queen with him. It was a 3-month honeymoon where the office was being inspected, so she kept her fangs hidden. The day after the inspection report came out, it was open season on the staff. The report did say that it was a very productive office. Well, several things came out within days. This was before we had electronic time cards, so she wrote up a 17-page rambling procedure on how to log your time. Annual leave staying in town was one color, going away was another color. Sick leave for yourself was one color, your male spouse was another, female spouse another, kids another, etc., etc. We had more colors than a Crayola 64 crayon box. Also, you had to log time by the minute in spite of the fact that the system only took 15-minute increments. People were taking 21 minutes of leave and signing out at 5:19. It drove HR insane. In the procedure, if you came back from coffee after 15 minutes or lunch after 45, you were on leave. You could only take lunch between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. unless you had express written permission in advance from her. We're a 24-hour organization. People on the night were getting daily written authorization from her merely to eat. I was away on assignment in a time zone 6 hours different and had to get written authorization from her to eat for my entire team on a daily basis because we never ate between 10 and 2 for that time zone. You also had to sign in at exactly 8 and out at 5. Again, we're a 24-hour organization. The Red Queen also developed office and unit spies who would report you if your coffee break went 16 minutes. The office spies were also reviewing your email and your time cards to ferret out any malcontent or color violators. As you can imagine, this did wonders for trust and morale. This is one of about 100 insane things that she did. Here's the malicious compliance part. One type of log entry on your time card was doing the time card. Huge swaths of employees began putting doing the time card on their time card. so your entire day could be doing the time card. Night shift employees began to only work between 8 and 5, and all night productivity stopped. It wasn't long before productivity ground to a halt in the office, and panic began to take hold in the ivory tower. Unfortunately, the Red Queen countered by doctoring the records and cooking the books to make it look like we were still being productive so that HQ wouldn't catch on, so she survived for 22 months before the office was on the verge of mutiny. I mean, why actually be productive when you can work 10 times harder to destroy productivity and make it only seem you're being productive? But word did get out, and an inspection was scheduled. In a move befitting Game of Thrones, the Red Queen threw Dan the Dirty under the bus and fled to a Connecticut office before inspection and then utterly destroyed that office. I wrote one of many letters to HQ saying that Westeros had nothing on our organization and that a day in the office was like an episode of Game of Thrones, only with less blood and more paper. It all eventually caught up to her. The very head of the organization threw her out on her head, but not before she destroyed one office and nearly destroyed 3 others. Last I heard, she was doing data entry in Colorado somewhere. You've gotta have some fun with the time card in that case, especially if they have a code for actually doing the time card. Can you imagine it? Going on break, doing the time card for going on break, doing the time card for doing the previous time card, doing the time card for doing the previous time card, doing the time card for doing the previous time card, etc, etc, etc. You could be there all day. Check out all 3 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.